Ask the Dean, episode 75. Back at it again with Dr. Scott Wright. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing really well, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing excellent, or as I like to say now, tickety-boo. I am tickety-boo.
Tickety-boo?
Because I watch too much British television.
Okay. I don't really know what that means, but all right.
It means tickety-boo. It means
Okay.
I think in Texas they say happy as a pig in mud. That's essentially tickety.
Not in my part of Texas. But okay, if you say so, then I'll go with that.
Scott's in the sophisticated part.
I'm in Austin, which is a little different than most places.
Pinkies up, wrists down.
Yes. Verinia Granum, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much. Glad to be back with the team.
Yes, we both missed last week.
We've got the whole gang here.
Yeah, I'm surprised they were able to hold down the fort without us, but they did.
Of course.
We muddled through somehow.
Yep, we did great.
They don't need us. We can go.
And my MAPS co-founder, Rachel Grubbs, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm trying to put up my own caption. Hello.
There you go.
I'm good. I am happy to have you guys back. Scott and I did have fun just being a duo, but it's always best when it's the whole team like that.
Definitely.
When it's everyone.
That's right.
Hello, everyone on YouTube. Hello, everyone on Instagram Live. If you're on Instagram Live, go ahead and jump over to YouTube at mapped.tv so you can ask your questions over there. That's where we will we'll take questions from. Asadina is here every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. You get the four of us, sometimes two or three of us, depending on who's out sick or who's traveling or whatever. Yep. But we're here to just be here and answer all of your questions for the hour. So it's something we love to do. Jarrell says, hi, y'all.
He must be in the South.
Yes, y'all. That's a very, very
Southern.
I don't know. I think y'all has been mainstreamed. Like I've heard.
You think so?
Jersey and Boston saying y'all now.
Jarrell or Gerald, whichever it is. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. You have to tell us where you are. He's in Austin.
He's in Austin.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
Nice.
Yep. All right. Well, we got our first question up. If we want to pull that one. Lena says, not a super dense question, but are there med schools in New York State that are friendly to out-of-state students? Yes. Private schools, most private schools. Although I think I was looking at some of the private schools, the MSAR, the Medical School Admissions Requirements service that AAMC proudly sells to everyone. They have access to in-state, out-of-state kind of stats for schools. And I was looking at it not that long ago, and there's one private school that I remember off the top of my head. I forget which school it is, but it was very in-state heavy, even though it was a private school. So you just have to look at all of the schools in the state. SUNY upstate, SUNY downstate are both in-state schools, so you're going to have less of an issue there, or more of an issue there as an out-of-state applicant. But you look at New York Medical College, we jokingly, that's my alma mater, we jokingly called it Cal State New York, or University of California, New York, when we were there, because we had tons of California students in my class. So you just got to do your research.
Yep.
All right, this isn't a question, but it's pretty happy.
Woohoo, Lauren!
Woohoo, Lauren! Yay!
Awesome.
I remember Lauren. I remember Lauren.
Yes, that's awesome.
Congratulations, Lauren. We are thrilled for you.
Absolutely.
All right, question from Mariah.
Mariah asks, do I mention learning impairments in a disadvantaged essay? I wasn't clinically diagnosed with anxiety until my second semester of college and didn't receive accommodations before. It did impact my grades. Thoughts. What are your thoughts?
I think so. I think so. I think it's something that impacted you, further along in life too. You weren't diagnosed until much later. Kudos to you for kind of plugging through it with an undiagnosed learning impairment. But I think it's definitely something you would mention.
Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
go with
I don't
that.
know.
Mhm.
Scott, what are some ramifications of talking about it in a disadvantaged essay or anywhere in
Well,
an application?
one of the ramifications is that you're revealing a disability, and if you reveal a disability early on, they're not they're not officially supposed to have that play into the decision making process.
Yeah.
But there will be an appropriate point in the application process where if you're accepted, they'll send you in forms that say, do you have any things that will require you to seek accommodations in the educational program. And so the school at that point will have to decide, can we make accommodations or can we not? Now, something like a learning impairment, then that's not going to be a big deal to make accommodations for. So I would say I agree with Verena. I think in this case, it would be something to discuss, particularly as it impacted your grades and how that's been resolved and how you see that as a disadvantage. But there would be other cases where I would say I would hesitate on that. But in this case, I think I would.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there are potentially other places if you don't want to talk about it in a disadvantaged essay or somewhere else. A lot of schools, as part of their secondary essay process, will ask about poor grades or is there anything else you want to know? And you could potentially talk about that stuff there.
Yep.
Jarrell from Austin asks, I'm a non-trad looking to shift careers into medicine after working in progressive campaign politics for 10 plus years. How much of a personal story and partisan detail should I talk about with admissions? Oh,
yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I'll
Let you talk in 1 second, but the far majority of higher education, I think, is more progressive. So there shouldn't be huge issues. But Scott, I'll let you give your thoughts there.
And I agree with that. What I would do is I would tone down the partisan aspect of it and just talk about being involved in the political scheme where you were really pushing for social justice and whatever that was defined as you, and sort of minimize the sort of whether you were Republican or Democrat and stuff like that.
Yeah. One of the things I like to remind people when they get kind of polarizing, even if I agree with them, is in the current climate of this country, whatever you think, about half of the country disagrees with you.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's excellent to be authentic and true to yourself. You definitely wouldn't want to apply to a school where you had to hide who you are.
Yeah.
But I also think, to your point, how much of your personal story and partisan detail should you talk about? We'll talk about the parts that are relevant, to who you are as a human and who you are as a pre-med applicant. But there are probably some parts that are less relevant or just, aren't pressing in those conversations.
Right.
I would say you probably would not want to apply to Liberty University's School of Osteopathic Medicine.
Probably not. No, probably not. Liberty.
Jarrell did add a little PS, which is sort of specifically talking about, applying to schools in conservative states because he lives in Texas.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a balance, right?
Yeah, it is a balance.
It's a balance between who you are and also like how often do you bring up politics in the first 10 minutes of meeting someone?
Yeah.
I mean, I hope not a lot because that's boring, man.
Well, and in this case where you're in Texas and you're going to be wanting to apply to all the Texas medical schools, even the most conservative ones, which would be, A&M and probably Texas Tech, you're still within the environment like Ryan was talking about, where it's a fairly broad, diverse environment. So I don't think you're going to have to be worried about talking about being a progressive and that's what you've been doing within the context of being balanced. like
It's
Rachel was
all
saying.
they're all centers for liberal indoctrination. Don't we know that?
Right.
Anyway.
All right.
So April asks, I have a D in physics 2 from my undergrad degree, but I'm doing a master's currently and will graduate with a 3.9. Should I retake that class, or showing an upward trend good enough? So as a mapped user, if you used mapped and you put that D into your mapped courses, you will get a little warning that says, hey, you got less than a C minus or less is not passing for a prereq like physics 2. Physics 2 is going to be a prereq for a large majority of medical schools out there, and they will not accept a D. Even if you're in a master's and you are taking, like, physics is your master's, they are going to want a higher grade than a D. So you will very likely have to retake that class.
That said, good job on getting.
Oops. Sorry.
Oops.
I didn't mean to
Someone's
do that.
playing with my comments.
I didn't mean to do that.
Yeah, good job on the 3.9. That's all I was saying.
Yeah,
April.
absolutely.
That's great.
Yep.
Absolutely.
It looked like you were saying it's really tough. You have to retake that class, but
I got so sidetracked so quickly. All right, Jessica.
Jessica asks, what's a competitive amount of clinical hours? I know continuous is important, but as a non-trad struggling to find time to get certified as a CNA, MA, EMT, and worried I'm not doing enough as an interpreter. So, Brittany, what do you think?
yeah, that's the question. What is the competitive amount?
Yeah.
As much as you need to kind of get a sense of what it is that you want to do. There's no set number. Obviously, more than 1 or 2 hours here and there, but it really comes down to what you can fit in, what you can gain from that experience that really shows you what it's like. So maybe not an actual part-time job, but maybe more like, less hours, but more consistently across, several months. Even if it's like part-time on the weekends, whatever you can fit in.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say, Dr. Wright or Dr. Gray or Rachel?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think particularly knowing that you're getting certified in a field that's going to be heavy patient contact, then I don't feel like, maybe backing off a little bit, because you're getting that certification and are going to be really working in an area that's going to give you a lot of clinical experience. Then I think that sounds appropriate to me.
Well, the way I read Jessica's comment is that she's struggling to find time to get certified. So I think right now the clinical work she's doing is interpreting.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. And remember, you don't have to be certified to get clinical experience.
Right.
I mean, those
Right.
are fancy clinical jobs for pre-meds. And depending on the state you're in, right here in Colorado, I mentioned it a lot. You don't have to be certified as an MA to work as an MA. So
Same here.
check with your local laws, because
Yeah.
you may be able to go to a small private practice and they'll train you on the job, and you can work as an MA without any sort of certification.
Or even scribing, maybe telescribing.
Yeah.
That can be a little bit more flexible in terms of scheduling hours, but that might be something to look into also.
Yeah. Telescribing now, I'd probably recommend a lot less now that the kind of bulk of the pandemic is over. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Please God. But yeah, scribing definitely. But being an interpreter is I would call that clinical experience. You're kind of in the heart of that conversation,
absolutely.
interacting with the doctors and the patients.
I agree with that.
All right. Michael asks, I recently retook a biology class. One total for 4 credit hours, 2 grades. Other totals for 5 credit, 1 grade. My question is, how would I go on about calculating AMCAS GPA? I'm not quite sure the question, but I don't.
Yeah, the way I read this, so Michael, with AMCAS, even if you do a retake, there isn't grade replacement with AMCAS, so you're simply entering all of that bio, right? So you're entering the one bio that it sounds like is essentially two credit hour classes, or 1 3 and 1 1, right? So you're entering each of those 2 courses, those 2 grades. And then you're also entering your 5 credit hour course for 1 grade, because that's how AMCAS will calculate it. It's going to take all of them and just include it in the overall average. And also, if you use Mapped will guide you to do just that, so that you can see how that impacts your GPA. So even if your school lets you do grade replacement, AMCAS does not.
Yeah. So I was so confused reading that. I missed the retaking the class part. So the question is, I retook my biology class. The class originally was 2 grades, 4 credits. My retake was 1 grade, 5 credits. Is AMCAS going to freak out about that? And the answer is no, right? They deal with this kind of stuff all the time.
Yep.
You put it in, you mark it as a retake, and it's all good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And good job on getting that retake done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
Chloe asks, if you completed a majority of your clinical experience 1 to 2 years after graduating undergrad, will that affect your chances of being accepted to medical school? The old checkbox mentality here, right, Scott, is you look at an application, you go, all right, so this student's applying to medical school. They got all of their clinical experience, or the bulk of it, within the first year or 2. And after that, I don't know what they're doing, but they're not getting clinical experience. I always talk about actions speak louder than words. And your words are saying, I want to go to medical school in your application, but your actions, your activities aren't potentially showing that with a lack of clinical experience. So yeah, it could affect your chances of getting into medical school.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And it might depend a little bit on the timeline.
Yeah.
Right. If Chloe is now 7 years post undergrad, then that gap is not a good look. She also might be saying, I didn't realize how important clinical was until I graduated, and now I've been doing it and I'm ready to apply. Right. Which, one of the things we try to teach is start it early. But if that's when she started getting it.
So my reading comprehension today is not good. So I'm just going to stop talking. I read this as she got the bulk of her experience 1 to 2 years at the beginning of her undergraduate, and now she's graduated.
Okay.
So my brain just doesn't work well today. I apologize. I'm going to shut up and just listen.
That's okay.
I'll read some questions for a while. That's fine.
We still love you, Ryan. Don't worry. You can hang with us.
Ryan's getting over a lot of stuff right now. He's coming out of the woods.
Oh.
Okay. Let's see. Abood asks, do most med schools look at recent MCAT score, or are there schools that average or look at all scores? Dr. Wright, you want to take a first stab at this?
I think most medical schools give you the advantage of your highest total score attempt. And so they're not going to average them. They're not going to, pick and have a super score where you're picking and choosing different sections from different exam takes. They're going to look at, and they're not going to look at your most recent score, because if you went down, that would disadvantage you. So, but I think most medical schools are going to give you the advantage of your highest total score in the process.
So I actually have, this is from a couple years ago. This is from 2017. But there was an advisor, and I'm looking off to my other screen over here. There was an advisor who did some research and talked to medical schools. And it was very interesting to see kind of what the responses were from the schools. And again, this is from 2017, so things might have changed. But I won't tell you the school name, but I'll just kind of read what the response was. Highest score, most recent score, super score, most recent plus trends, most recent, highest, all scores and trends, most recent, all scores, takes average. So you can see it's kind of all over the place, with potentially most recent being the most common, at least in this small subset. But that's something I think the mapped team, we can kind of add that to our kind of inquiries when we're gathering all the data for our databases and stuff.
Yeah,
is
that's a good idea.
understanding
Yeah.
how schools
Mhm.
look at these. I was surprised that there are, at least on here, I think there were 3.
A lot of most recent ones.
Yeah, but I was surprised there were at least, I think, 3 that said super score. Looking at again, maybe it's just 1 here, but I thought there were another one.
And
But anyway.
I my guess is that the AAMC, the MCAT people turn over and yell a lot when schools super score, because that totally tears apart the integrity of the scoring system.
Oh yes, the integrity
Statistically.
must come first. Yes.
No, I'm not agreeing with it. I'm just saying
I know.
I think that's what they do.
I was like, let me just insert the graph here of the AMC's revenue streams, and then we
Yes,
can talk about their
exactly.
integrity a little more.
No, I get it.
Oh man.
Oh, feeling the snark today. All right. So
Throwing some
Abood,
shade.
bottom line here is it varies and you're not in control of it. Sorry.
Yeah. And there was one school on here that had the very unfortunate response of highly recommend 1 good score. Multiple scores are not looked upon favorably. It's like,
Whatever.
shut up.
Really.
Anyway.
Fairy tale.
Yes. All right. Let's. I'll work on my reading. Everyone seems to have experiences as a scribe, MA, CNA, or EMT. Meanwhile, my only clinical specific experiences are caretaking, PT, rehab aid, and shadowing. Will these suffice?
Depends. As with everything else in this process.
What
Yep.
does it depend on?
Do you feel that based on everything that you've done, it's sufficient enough for you to apply, right? So have you learned about what it means to do this job day in and day out? It's what you're listing, caretaking, PT. I mean, it sounds clinical. I'm not sure what specifically you did. But it's one of those questions of, do I have enough hours? Is this, did I check off all the right boxes?
No.
Well, and the other thing that strikes me on that question is it says everyone seems to have experience as a scribe. You don't know what everyone has. That is not knowable. Maybe within your little circle, a lot of people seem to have those experiences, but I would say when you look at the big picture, I think most people do not have things that require some kind of certification or whatever. My guess would be most people are doing a lot more similar things to what you're doing in terms of caretaking, being an aide of some sort, and stuff like that, as opposed to the other way around. At least that would be my feeling. That would be another really interesting bit of data to collect from people, Ryan, if we could. How many of you have have done this kind of job?
Yeah. Well, we have that data in MAP, so the more people that use MAP, the more of that data we can gather. My one concern with this is caretaking. We talk a lot about. It's definitely clinical experience, but if that is the far majority of your clinical experience, and Rachel, you mentioned this the other night at e-shadowing when we were doing some Q&A, was taking care of your own family member as a caretaker is very different than taking care of someone else's family member, and so that may not be the best clinical experience to lean on as the bulk. If you're caretaking for other people, then great, maybe that's better. In which case you are an MA, you're just doing it in a home potentially. And then PT, a rehab aid, is iffy one, right? Because you're in a PT office typically doing rehab. You're definitely interacting with patients. They're the physical therapy patients. But there may be some people out there that go, well, you're telling me you want to be a doctor, but all of your experience is around physical therapy. So be careful with that as well.
Agreed. That'd be like applying to medical school and the chief amount of your clinical experience is in a dental office.
Yep.
Be the same kind of thing.
Same thing. Yeah. Clinical experience, but in the wrong clinic.
What?
Scott, what are you reading?
I'm not gonna say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Let's see. What we got here?
Aylin says, I work for the nutrition department, visiting patients in the hospital in person to take their food orders based on the diet order, educate the patient foods they can or cannot have. Is this clinical? I think this is a new question. I haven't seen the nutrition part before. So,
I'd
is
say
this
it's clinical.
server, like a restaurant server, or is this clinical? Because they're kind of interacting and saying, well, based on your high blood pressure that you were just diagnosed with, you need a low sodium diet, and here's what you can have.
I think you can identify it any way you want. If you want to identify it as clinical, but then you have to be able to explain it both in terms of your written application as well as in an interview, how you see that as clinical. This is, potentially a little bit of a stretch in my view, but I think it really depends on your day-to-day, how much of your experience is actually with the patient. That's the key here.
Yeah. And I might add to that.
And not just bringing the tray in and saying, here's your food.
Right. And how much of the experience is educating, not just taking a food order. Yeah.
That's right.
All right. Well, you got something, Aylin. It's better than nothing.
But what Aylin does have that a lot of people don't have is access to other departments, other people to say like, hey, I'm already in the hospital. Can I come and play with you for a little bit?
Yep. Yeah. I talked to someone the other day who is in a relatively small town, and there's only one hospital, and all they had open was the gift shop. And she was like, I know it's not clinical, but I took it because I'm hoping I can parlay it into something else. And I was like, that is exactly the right response.
Yeah.
At least you're in the building. You're starting to prove that you're reliable.
Yeah. When that doctor comes in for his like afternoon sugar fix and wants to buy a candy bar, be like, hey,
how you doing?
Can I come follow you around?
How you doing?
Exactly. All right. Let's keep going here.
Rachel asks, if I haven't received a secondary from my school because they look at the full application before sending them out, could I try asking for a secondary, or would that look bad or be disrespectful? Again, I think this is our friend Rachel. The Art of Med Rachel. Scott, what do you think? If you at UT Southwestern, and I don't know what you did, but you did reviews and you screened for secondaries, and you either hadn't gotten to a student yet, or you had screened a student out of getting a secondary and you just don't notify them of that. And they go, hey, like, I want a secondary, please. What does that look like?
I think that would depend a lot on the school and on the personality of the school.
Yeah.
My feeling is that, it's not going to change their process any. Just because you asked for one, they're going to go, I'm sorry, it didn't work that way. But I don't think it would look bad or be disrespectful. I would just say you're probably not going to get the answer you want.
Yeah. You could be disrespectful if you
How
write
you
and go,
it,
excuse me, I've been waiting and I haven't heard anything from you, and it's just very unprofessional that I haven't heard from you. Can you please send my secondary now? Obviously, you could be disrespectful, but I think if you just maybe form it as an update letter and say, looking forward to receiving my secondary, instead of saying like, can I have it, please? I think there very good ways of requesting one without
Agreed.
being disrespectful and forceful.
I agree.
Yeah.
I liked your very gracefully, like, it depends on the institution. If it's a very stuck up one, they're like,
Yeah.
who does this person think they are?
Yeah, right. I mean, some schools are that way.
Yes, they are.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
Some schools are like, and the way I would look at it, if I was the director of admissions now, I would be like, well, I would look them up and see where they are in the process. And if we had reviewed them already, I might look them up again and review them again just to see, well, did we miss something or whatever? But I don't think it would make, really change the process any. But, I always looked at it when I was at Southwestern is that I'm going to take whatever opportunity I can to look at applicants. And if for whatever reason an applicant is brought to my attention, then I'm gonna look at it. I'm gonna say because I don't want to miss something that like if an advisor calls and says, "Hey, don't miss the student. Their GPA is a little low, but they're just fantastic, spectacular, whatever." Just because that advisor called doesn't mean I'm going to just jump all over it. But I am going to look at it and see, is this something I want to pursue?
Yep. All right. During an open interview, can I reuse a story I mentioned in my AMCAS or secondary application? For instance, if they ask about working with different cultures. This is a very common question. And I feel like a very common mistake that students make is not answering a question to the best of your ability with the strongest anecdote or story or whatever, because you already talked about it in a prior part of the application. And so what you're doing is you're hindering your ability to have that conversation because you've already talked about it before. So in my mind, unless the interviewer specifically says, like, without telling me anything that you've already written about in your application, blah, 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 right? Unless they specifically tell you not to, then answer the question the best way possible, even if you've written about it. And I wouldn't preface it with, well, as I've already written about in my personal statement, here's what I want to tell you. That's like in an email going, as per my last email, which is super passive aggressive.
Yeah.
So it is okay to
I agree with that.
talk about it.
Sometimes I have to type as per my last email and then delete it later because I just need to release some of that snark.
I literally did that this morning to a customer service email when I'm having an issue with a device in the house, and I'm like, as I mentioned in my initial response, like, it's not working.
All right, quick feedback from Isaiah.
Just finished putting my grades into Mapped. It was a huge encouragement boost when actually seeing my upward trend. That's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Way to go, we get both sides. Like, it's an encouragement. I see my trends, or like, I didn't know I was that bad. So
and you know what? Even with the cases of I didn't know that bad, I still say woo, because you were brave and you faced the truth, and now you have data to move onward. Right. And I've definitely had people who said, like, it was a little worse than I was expecting, but it is a relief because like sometimes people hold off on entering all their stuff into MAP because they're a little nervous. But
once
you
it's
gotta
out
have
there,
a starting point. You got to know what you're improving from.
Exactly.
You have to know. Ignorance is not bliss in this case.
All right.
Jackie asks, I'm a non-trad taking prereq classes at a local state university. Will it be bad if I don't get a committee letter from my postbac school?
No, I mean, unless the school specifically says we require a committee letter, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think it's
and
fine.
schools can't require, because not every student goes to a school that has committees, or has committees that write letters.
Or Don't worry about it.
Not a problem. All right. Andrew asks, I'm going to graduate next semester, which will mark 3 years as an undergrad. How will adcoms view this? And do I need to make it noticeable?
Well,
So a youngin,
Mhm.
as we call him, a youngin.
Mhm.
Scott, as again, a former director of admissions at UT Southwestern, when you had the youngins applying, did that weigh into decisions of like, well, is there maturity here, or we want them to go take a gap year to ripen a little bit more? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think that the schools do look at maturity, and they're trying to determine, is this an appropriate time for you to enter medical school? I would say for the majority of students that come in on this kind of quick path method, I think that they're fine. That their maturity is fine. I think the letters of recommendation are going to be important for faculty members or a supervisor or whatever to really talk about their maturity level and their social skills, communication skills, things like that. But all in all, I don't think just because you graduate a year early or even 2 years, we have students who are even graduating after 2 years post high school because they had so many credits, dual credits in high school. But I think most students are going to be fine, but there is a chance that a school might think, well, this is a little young for us. But it's going to be based on behaviors. It's going to be based on what the letters say, stuff like that, as opposed to just because of the age.
Mm.
Yep.
All right. Aylin again. If my committee letter was dated June 2021, do I need to re-ask them, or do I need to ask them to redate, rather, it for the June 2022 cycle? So we've talked about LORs being dated before. Scott, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, you need to check with your committee. They may, if this is a year-old committee, the committee may not be willing to do that. Number one, they may not be willing to just redate it. They may want you to go through the whole committee process again. So it just depends on the school. Like in my iteration as a pre-med advisor at a large school with a lot of pre-meds and a lot of applicants every year, we would not have done that. We would have said, well, we'll submit last year's letter with last year's date and everything on it, or you can go through the process again.
Mm-hmm.
Lifeline. As a non-traditional student, I was a nursing major. Do I put in my nursing courses into MAPT as well to calculate AMCAS GPA? I'm currently a postbac student. Yes, every single class.
Yep.
Now, one thing to be aware of, Lifeline, is that some of your nursing science courses may not count towards your science GPA.
Or the prereqs.
Or prereqs. So your best resource for that is your advisor at school. They'll be able to tell you which courses count, but often science courses that are specifically for other health profession tracks don't count as pre-med recs. And it just depends, depends on the size of the school, depends on the way they tracked their sciences. But every course you took ever after you graduated from high school goes into both MAPT and your application GPA calculation. It's just a question of how it counts.
Yep.
Good question.
That is a good question.
I definitely had people think some classes didn't count. They all count.
They all count. Yeah, and that goes for activities as well, my friends. I talked to a student yesterday who applied to medical school. It's his second application, and so I'm guessing he made the same mistake on his first application cycle to medical school. He started his undergraduate courses back in 2002. It is now 2021 for those of you keeping score. He had 5 activities on his application starting in 2011. I was like, what were you doing the rest of the time? And he talked, and he's like, well, I was working here and I was working here doing retail stuff. I'm like, well, why isn't that on your application? It's not just a kind of a show of everything medical that you've been doing to show that you're getting the experiences in and around medicine, to show that you want to be a physician. But it's also a snapshot of your timeline of what has been keeping you busy throughout the years.
Yep.
And you working a retail job or a server job or whatever else non-medical can help the admissions committees understand who you are, and give a lot more intangibles potentially that you're bringing to the table. So don't just put medical stuff on your application activities.
Yep. Agreed.
Show us who you are as a person. Becca Ramos.
I'd really want to make my interest in pathology a central theme of my personal statement, as I already work in the field and wish to further continue down this road as a physician. Is this wise?
No.
No. So your personal statement is your declaration of why do you want to be a doctor, not why do you want to be a pathologist. So I would save that pathology statement for your ARIS application to residency programs.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about not having a central theme, right? So the theme should be you and why you want to be a doctor.
That's the theme.
Just to pile on a little, and not because of you, Becca, but because this is a common kind of question. So there's two things here. One is most people who think they know their specialty when they apply to med school end up changing their mind.
Yep.
And also, one of the biggest mistakes we see is people not answering the prompt. The prompt isn't what kind of doctor do you want to be. The prompt isn't tell me why you'll be a good doctor. The prompt is why medicine. So just stay on topic.
Yeah. And they're going to get an understanding of your interest in pathology because your experiences in your activity section are going to be around pathology. So focus there for that.
Yeah.
All right. A little bit of a confusingly worded one. Just warning you, Ryan, because I know you're having a no bones day.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a bones or no bones day. Let me,
Rachel said it was a no bones day. She chimed in and let us know.
Is it a bones day? All right, they're checking. So I've been pressed to find advice about my IA plagiarism warning. And had messages from the internet saying to talk about the warning, and my own advisor tells me that the warning is internal and not to. All right. So this is a very common question that comes up when someone has some potential institutional action. So that's what IA is, for those of you wondering, has a potential institutional action, but the institutional action was handled internally. So your English professor, let's say, had some concerns about your paper, ran it through a plagiarism tool, and they have some concerns that it's plagiarized, but it doesn't rise to the level of going to the registrar or bursar or whatever office at whatever school handles marking your transcript and your official records as having had this plagiarism issue. And so I've always leaned on, like, do as much research as possible, talk to 1,000 different people at your school. And if it's not showing up anywhere, if they're like, no, it was really just a slap on the wrist, it wasn't an official anything, then you probably don't need to put it on your application. Right. And you just praise your lucky stars that it wasn't an official sanction from the school and it was just a slap on the wrist. And I don't know if that's being a little deceitful. Scott, what do you think?
I agree with you. I think if it's not an official action by the school, then there's no reason to put it on there. I think the way that this applicant is describing it, it was a warning, and I would say, okay, warning is different than an official sanction. And so I agree with you. I talk to the advisor, I talk to the registrar, make sure that you know the ground rules here in terms of what's going to show up on your transcript or whatever. But all in all, I would say that I agree with you, Ryan. I would say not to include it. Yeah. What do you think,
Right.
Brenda?
Rachel, what do you think? You look like you made a face when I was saying that.
Oh, I was making a face at trying to find questions I hadn't answered.
Oh.
Because some people are posting twice.
Yeah.
So I'm like, wait, where did I go? But Vernia, you chime in if you have something to
Well,
say.
see, the like anxious goody two shoes that I am,
The rule follower.
the rule follower, I would just be so worried that some
Yep.
way, somehow it's gonna come up. So I probably personally would say something, maybe address it as a red flag and in a secondary or something. But I'm gonna agree with the other experts and say if it's not on your transcript, then make sure, triple check, get it in writing from someone that says they're not going to reveal this
Yeah.
accidentally or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This comes up a lot more with expunged criminal records.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've had my uncle-in-law on the Pre-Med Years podcast twice talking about the legal ramifications of arrests and other things with your application and how to answer these questions, both in primary and secondary applications. And he always warns about expunged records because one person may say it's expunged and it's expunged in one place, but not in another place. And with court records and all this stuff, everything has to be like picture perfect for records to be truly expunged and not found. And he's dealt with a lot of medical license issues where people thought their records were expunged, and so on their like medical license or whatever, when they're applying for a medical license, they'll say, oh yeah, I don't have any criminal record. And then the background check that the state board or whoever uses is like, well, that's not what this says. There's a bigger issue with potentially lying than just saying, oh yeah, I had this one issue in the past and it's not a problem anymore.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Ryan. I think, that to me, that's a totally different thing than what we're talking about here, though. That when you start talking about criminal stuff, there are so many little fingers that go down into so many different areas and stuff. It's just, it really can be a problem. But with an institutional warning like this, I would say, typically that's not going to be an issue.
Yeah. Dania's here. Hi, Dania. Vanity Nutrition. It's hanging out with us today.
Yay.
Let's see. Here we go.
How to get strong clinical LOR if bulk of clinical experience is being an EMT and only working with other EMTs? What should I do? So here's the question. Who says you need a strong clinical letter of recommendation?
Yep.
That's the question, right? I don't know if I've ever seen a really strong bias from a medical school that says we need clinical letter of recommendation. And medical schools are not accepting you because you have strong clinical skills. That's not why they're accepting you, right? It's a very big mistake that students make, I think, in their personal statement and elsewhere of like, I know how to take a history, and I know how to do venous draws, and I know how to run whatever PCR lab thing. I don't even know lab stuff. And it's like, okay, great. Like, I don't need you to know that, but I guess it's
going to
great
teach
that
you
know
that.
it. Right? So yeah. So
well, and the other thing I was thinking about this particular question too is that if you want a clinical letter, if that's just something that you feel like you want to have because of your experience as an EMT and stuff like that, get your shift leader to write the letter, or get several of the people that you work with to go together and write a letter together. You can do it in a lot of different ways.
You can, and usually EMTs are overseen by a medical director who's typically a physician. So obviously there are typically performance reports and other things that are tracked, and you potentially could get signed off by a physician.
Yeah.
All right. Sean asks, how important are LORs? So it's LOR day today. Do you think they can make or break an application? How much weight do adcoms put on them? Well, Scott, you did a whole Inside Med Admissions about letters of recommendations, did you not?
We did. I think absolutely, and I think that what we're looking for in a letter is personal. A very deeply personal letter. They typically are the kind of thing that can really improve an application. I would say it's very unusual, perhaps even rare, for a letter of recommendation in and of itself to break an application. I've never really, I can't recall ever seeing a letter so bad that it, totally shut down an application. That'd be highly unusual. But I do think that admissions committees put a lot of credibility in letters of recommendation, particularly if they are personal and give a lot of good information. That the adcoms do to really look at those and evaluate them. Admissions committees see thousands of letters every year, and so they know the difference between a typically good letter and an awesome letter. They get what that difference looks like. And so when they see a letter that is just over the top, wow, this is an amazing letter, then that's going to mean a lot more than a letter that's good, but not over the top. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. Probably have time for one more, maybe two. Let's see.
Jessica asks, as a career changer coming from law, I always denied jobs due to lack of experience. I've been a caretaker for multiple people, non-family for a year now. Is that enough if I can't find other work? We talked about this, Rachel, didn't we? In e-shadowing the other day, it's like, I can't get a job without experience. I can't get experience without a job. It's like, come on, people. So Jessica, the best thing to do is try to find smaller places, smaller private practices where it's one or two physicians. You potentially could get some opportunities there. Being a caretaker for multiple people, non-family. I like how she added that. So she was listening earlier, potentially. Right. That's clinical experience. You're taking care of people. So, yeah, do what you can do.
So I think the big issue here in this question, which can be seen either way, is that you're coming from law.
I was going to say that too. I didn't want to bring it because I make too many law jokes.
You're tainted and it's never going to happen, or they're going to be like, you finally saw the light.
Yeah. So we like lawyers more and more in this household. My wife does a lot of work with lawyers, and I can see how much a physician being involved in these cases makes or breaks this person's life. It's crazy. So for all you future doctors out there, be kind to lawyers, at least the good lawyers.
Yeah.
Not the ones that are like,
I don't know. I think a lot of those old lawyer jokes come from a time when the market was glutted with lawyers. But personally, I've been excited to see not just doctors dabbling in law, but doctors starting to get involved in government. I think, more and more it's clear that we need people who are helping make the laws, understand science.
Well, there's some doctors in politics that I won't call them out by name,
right.
but
in any profession, there's good and bad eggs, right? So Jessica, they're joshing, but I know they're just joshing you, but I just want to chime in. I'm excited about your go back.
I was kidding, Jessica. I hope you know that.
Yeah. I talked to a lawyer for specialty stories, and it was very funny because she did a very lawyerly thing after the episode came out. She's like, I need you to edit this and edit that and edit this. I'm like, okay, but it was very interesting, and she didn't know that this field existed before going into medicine. So she was a lawyer, she wanted to go to medical school, and then she found forensic psychiatry, and there's tons of law side of things, and she was very excited and fit well for her. So Lots of options out there for you.
Yep. Well, it's 1:58 Eastern time anyway, so we should probably move towards wrapping up. Friends, as always, if you didn't get to your question this week, we will be back. We're always here every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m.
Yes.
Pacific.
Yes.
Yes, we are. And if
Absolutely.
you are a part of Mapped, you can add chat advising onto your Mapped plan and chat with us inside of Mapped specifically about your situations. So
Yeah.
that's something to think about as well.
Definitely. We can get into some more nitty gritty because it'll be personal.
Mhm.
All righty, everyone. Thank you for coming, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.